Hi everyone, my name is Allison. I am a knitter based here in Nebraska, and this is my little podcast where I talk about everything that I have been working on lately. It has been quite a while since I've been able to film like a normal podcast episode. If you saw my most recent video, it would have been a little bit of like a trip recap and yarn haul from our recent trip to Vancouver and a couple of things that I picked up for my birthday. So that is available if you want to see it. And if you see a tail flicking around, I have my cat, Jack, is sitting on my lap. But today I wanted to bring it back to standard, back to normal podcast episode and talk about what I have been knitting on lately because there has been a whole lot. Oh my goodness. So last time I left you, I was like planning things for the trip. I had recently finished a shawl that I had knit specifically to wear on the trip, and then it turned out to be a crazy heat wave while we were in Vancouver. Didn't wear any of my knitwear besides my silk cozy classic light t-shirt because it was way too hot to even consider wearing anything woolly. So the first thing that I have to share with you today is a finished object, and this is the Garter Glide t-shirt by James N. Watts. So I will put in photos of me wearing it here so you can see how it looks like when it's on. But I knit this as a test for James. I was actually talking to my mother-in-law about it. She was like, how did you test that? Like, how did that come to be? So essentially, I literally just saw a post on Instagram. I don't know if he posted it to his feed or if it was just on Instagram stories, but was literally just calling for testers for this shirt. And I filled out like a Google form with my information, what size I would be knitting, what yarn I was thinking about using, and I think my links to like Instagram and Ravelry. And then like a day or two later, I got an email that was, here's the pattern, here's the requirements of what you need to do to test for this, here's how we're gonna move forward, and the date that it was due. So as I'm filming this, the pattern's not out yet, but I'm not entirely sure when I'm going to have time to edit this. So if the pattern is already out, I will link to it in the description, but if not, then I will link to my Ravelry project, which will update with a link to the pattern once the pattern is released. So I knit this in Fibra Natura lace weight linen yarn, and it's in two different colors. So the first color is mineral, the second color is blue spruce, which is the slightly darker color. And then for the actual pattern, the collar and like the center stripe is the two of them held together. So throughout the entire pattern, I'm holding two strands of lace weight together, and then it's for blue spruce on one side, mineral on the other side, and the two of them mixed together in the middle. This pattern was super quick and easy to knit because it is, the whole thing's in garter stitch, so it's not a lot. There is a little bit of purling in the neckline when you're knitting in the round, but for the vast majority of this, you're just knitting, and it is pretty quick and easy to bang out. So I think it took me like 2 weeks of not exclusively knitting on this to knit through this whole t-shirt. I knit a size medium. I did block it to the pattern measurements, but after taking it off of blocking and like wearing it and, you know, it not being stretched within an inch of its life, it has kind of shrunk in slightly from the intended measurements, but it is still pretty darn close to the medium size. It's a super clever pattern, so it is knit from side to side. So you pick up like the sleeve stitches, you knit all the way across, changing yarns, you know, as you get to certain locations. You do the neckline decreases and increases, and you do the same thing for the front and the back, and then you seam the whole thing together after you've blocked it out. After that, you pick up the neckline and pretty much you're done. So it is pretty quick and easy to knit. I actually think, even though it looks a little bit more complicated, or it looks like a kind of a high effort project because it's knit from side to side and because there's a little bit of seaming involved, but I think for like a very adventurous beginner, it could be your first sweater because it is knit in garter stitch. If you've been knitting a lot of like practice squares or like pot holders or dishcloths, like that kind of thing, where you're used to knitting flat and knitting in garter stitch, this is kind of just that, but you're adding in increases and decreases. There is some knitting in the round for the neckline, but besides that, I really do think that it could be a good option for beginner knitters because you are kind of working with the skills that you already have. You're just adding a couple in with increases and decreases if you haven't done that yet. For my color choices for this t-shirt, I was super inspired by the brand Maker and Mineral, who I have followed for like years, who they do these really cool like split down the center shirts and skirts and dresses. I think they might do pants as well. And they're typically tonal, so it'll be like a dark purple and a lighter purple, or like a dark green and a lighter green, and that's kind of what I was going for with this t-shirt, and I think it turned out really cool. It's definitely more of a cool girl t-shirt than what I would normally wear, but I do think it's awesome, especially for summer. So what I was planning on is wearing this as like more of like a beach cover-up, like if you're wearing like your swimsuit but you want to walk out and about somewhere, put on some shorts, pop this on, and I think it'll look really cool. Or the way I styled it when I took some pictures is kind of more, kind of 70s, I guess. Like the t-shirt doesn't read 70s at all, but I wore it with like some light wide leg jeans with, I think it has, those pair of jeans have a button fly. I just thought that it looked really cool. The fit of the t-shirt is super boxy and oversized, so that is definitely something to note. But because a lot of the shape of it is achieved through blocking, you could kind of make the shirt itself smaller, like width-wise, by just not blocking it as aggressively. And I will say, I think the most difficult thing about this pattern is getting gauge. It is calling for, like, even in the pattern, if he doesn't change it, it says that the gauge is pretty extreme. So I was not able to meet gauge with the needles that are called for in the pattern. I did have to size up my needles, and I could have even sized them up more than that. So it's definitely something to be aware of. Definitely swatch for this and make sure that you pin out or treat your swatch as you would your finished garment. So if you're someone who wants to like throw their t-shirt into the wash and, you know, wash and dry it that way, make sure that you test that with your swatch first, because I did test those with my swatches and I will not be able to put this into the wash because it went way in when I tested my swatches, putting them in the washing machine. So it is very much a hand wash, lay flat to dry situation, which is totally fine with me, but it is definitely something to note. So you might need to size up your needles and block it pretty aggressively to get gauge, or it is a quite oversized fit. So if getting the exact measurements isn't that big of a deal to you, I think you'll probably be fine. And then the other thing with that is there is some casting on and casting off and increases and decreases in the pattern. If you're knitting this, make sure to do those super, super loosely, because it is going to be a little bit more difficult to pull those stitches into place. If you knit them too tight and then you're trying to stretch while you block it, that can impact being able to get the intended size. I think that's everything that I wanted to make sure that I said about the Garter Glide t-shirt, but I do think that it is a really cool pattern. It is super fun to like kind of break the way your brain would like normally think about knitting a sweater, and knitting it, you know, side to side and knitting it in pieces is not something I've ever done before. So that was definitely really cool to do. But if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments down below about like testing in general or about this exact pattern, and I will be happy to chat with you about it. I have some tea today. I mentioned in my last video that work has been super busy lately, and that has not changed. And I've been in a lot of meetings and doing a whole lot of talking and then doing podcasting. My throat, it's not like my throat doesn't hurt, it just like feels parched. So I have a little bit of tea with honey. I actually got this mug while we were in Vancouver, in Granville Island. I was talking about it's kind of like an artist store area. There was a little pottery there, that we talked to the owner for a while. Actually, it wasn't the owner. He was like there for the owner as a friend because the owners weren't able to be there. It doesn't really matter, but I found a couple of mugs and I think they're really cool. I really like the subtle gray bluey black design, and it's like perfectly the size of my hands. Like my hands fit around it perfectly, which is just really nice. So I'm very excited about these mugs that I got, and having just a little bit of tea to soothe my throat. Oh. Here we go. But this was my only finished object lately because I've been doing so much knitting all over the place. I've just been working on so many different projects, and that's something that I'll talk about a little bit towards the end. But I feel like I've been working on too many different projects, and so therefore I'm like not making a lot of progress on all of them because I'm working on too many different little things. So my next work in progress you will not have seen at all. I don't think I posted it on my Instagram either, but I am testing the Silverstone sweater for Chantal of Knitatude. So this is an upcoming release from her. It's a drop shoulder sweater, or not drop shoulder, maybe it is called drop shoulder. Either way, it is a fairly fitted with 0 to up to 2 inches of positive ease, somewhat bulky weight sweater. So I am knitting this primarily in a Cascade 220, sorry, it's not, it's Cascade Eco Plus, and the shade is, it's just a color number. The color number is 9734, which my mom actually got me in like a swap, or not a swap. I think she got like a grab bag at a knitting event once, and she's like, I'm not going to knit with this pink, but Allison might, and I do really like it. I also feel like it is slightly silly looking. So I think this is very much going to be like Allison's fun winter sweater because it is bright pink, a little bit chunky, and then the mohair you can see kind of changes in color throughout. So it's definitely a fun sweater and not like an everyday kind of sweater, at least for me. But I'm knitting this in Cascade Eco Plus, which I have used before on my husband's zipper sweater, which I actually didn't love how pilly that gets. I'm hoping that knitting this with the mohair might help with that. Maybe it'll make it worse, I'm not sure. But I have knit other garments like holding mohair with a different yarn, and I didn't find that they really got pilly, and I wonder if that's the mohair. So, I mean, let me know if you have knit with a similar combination of yarns, whether or not you found it to be pilly, if like the mohair helped to avoid some of that, or if that's just something that I'm going to have to accept. So this is what the yarn looks like separately. Honestly, I probably could have gotten gauge with just this Cascade Eco Plus alone, but she's doing this, I believe, as a collaboration with Lion Brand. And the yarn that she's using is like super, super fuzzy. Like that's the vibe. It's meant to be a super fuzzy sweater. It's like 90s inspired. That's why it's called the Silverstone sweater after Alicia Silverstone, who was in Clueless. And I wanted to get a little bit of that fuzz, so I included the mohair in mine as well. And here is where I am so far. I've totally finished the body. I'm almost done with one sleeve. I'll finish that tonight, and then I have the second sleeve to go. So like I said, this is a test knit again, 2 test knits in a row, which is a lot for me. I'm not a big pattern tester. I'm not someone who like goes out of their way to like constantly be testing patterns. So I did want to talk about it a little bit because I was talking to my mother-in-law while we were on vacation, and she had, I don't think she said that she's ever tested a pattern before, but correct me if I'm wrong. But it's another one where I found it on Instagram. So Chantal had put out a call saying that she was looking for testers for this pattern. I filled out a form, you know, with what size and what yarn I was going to use and links to my various, you know, social media and stuff. Basically proved that I would be like capable of testing the pattern, and then, you know, heard back via email that I was chosen to test. Like I said, I haven't done a ton of pattern testing in the past. The only ones that I've done them for are socks. So these are 2 like very, very different products or projects to practice with or to test out testing. And it was very interesting to see how completely different the processes worked, or how the actual like testing period was so different between the two different designers. So like I said, for both of these tests, I signed up for them through Instagram. You like fill out a form, more or less kind of proving that you're able to do the test. Like you have the knitting skills required to complete this project. You also have to agree to like measure out how much yarn you use and stuff like that, so that the designer can provide more double-checked, more accurate information of what future pattern users will need for their exact size. These are the first two sweaters that I have tested, so I don't know if it's different for other garments or like people who have tested a lot. Please let me know in the comments if, like, what your typical experience is like, because it was very interesting to me to see how different they were. So for James' pattern, they basically sent the pattern, sent some instructions, and sent us on our way, and that was kind of it. You fill out information of what you've done once you've completed it, or if you like found any errors throughout the testing project process, you could just email them in. And then we did receive a couple of updated patterns during the duration of the test period with a couple of tweaks of things that were incorrect the first time around. And that's kind of more or less it. It was a very chill test. There was not a lot of back and forth. There were really very many errors in the pattern anyway, so we really didn't get a lot of updates, and we all kind of went on our merry way. So for me, what I got out of it was, I mean, it was kind of just a completely new experience. Testing was new, knitting side to side and seaming a garment was completely new. It was very interesting to see like how that worked for me as like a motivational factor of getting the finished object done. Because like I said, I am definitely someone who does a little bit, arguably too much dabbling. Like I have a lot of different works in progress right now. So it was kind of nice to have that deadline as like, you have to get this done before this date, but as a way of like helping me focus on a project and seeing it through all the way to completion. It was also kind of interesting. I don't typically, when I'm just knitting for myself, I don't usually measure how much yarn I've used unless I note like I used X number of skeins, but I don't usually like weigh out and measure and do the math to figure out exactly how much yarn I've used. So that was a little bit different, and just kind of like notating like things that I would do in the future if I were knitting it again as I was going, which I don't normally do. So like things like casting on and casting off really loosely is something that I made a note of. You can read through all of my thoughts in my Ravelry page. I also cover basically all of the same information on my Instagram if that's better for you. And that was it. That was like my first testing experience. It was very smooth, it was very easy and very low key. And then on the other side of things, knitting this Silverstone sweater for Knitatude has been much more hands-on. So it was a process, and very similar at the beginning, of like filling out your form, getting the pattern, agreeing to complete it by whatever date, blah, blah, blah. A lot of that stuff was the same, but this one has like an Instagram group where people are talking through the process. They're talking about other things that they're knitting. It was kind of a lot for me to keep up with because there were a few more issues with this pattern as we were testing it that had been updated as we were going along. So there were some changes to the gauge, there were some changes to like how things were worded, and you kind of had to keep up with the Instagram chat in order to keep that information correct with your version of the pattern, which I didn't really love. That's not the most effective way for me to retain information. So like there was something, I can't remember if it was about the sleeves or what it was for, but there was a question that I had that had been covered in the group chat previously, like while we were on vacation, and I just didn't notice it. And so I had to ask again, and people had already covered it. So I was kind of repeating information, whatever. I think in the future, I'm not sure how many designers set up their tests this way, where the feedback is mostly through Instagram throughout the testing process. I don't think that that's something that I would seek out again in the future because, like I said, for me, functionally, like I'm working on the pattern that I have in front of me. So if changes need to be made, I would prefer to just get a new pattern update via email, which is what we got with the Garter Glide t-shirt, instead of trying to like make notes and change on the fly via Instagram. So between this and the Silverstone sweater, I'm really curious to hear from other people who have test knit or test knit in the past or want to test knit. I don't know, like what's your ideal situation for communication during testing? Like, is that something where you would want a super active and engaged like group of people, or are you someone who kind of wants to like get the pattern and go off and do their own thing? Because I think I'm definitely more of the latter, and I do have some loose plans, definitely not nothing to write home about yet, but I have some loose plans for some sock patterns that I would like to release in the future that I might do a test for, and I'm very curious to see what people would prefer, because the last time that I test knit a pattern for myself, I did it on Facebook. Like I had a Facebook group where people could check in, and it worked okay. I wouldn't say that it was like the be all end all. I think what would probably be best for me is just doing it via email, but that's kind of where it works for me. Hi. You want to jump up? But yeah, I'm very curious to hear what other people think about that. Whew. And yeah, let me know in the comments down below. Get out of here. I am getting very close to the end here. Like I said, one sleeve down, one sleeve to go. It is a pretty quick knit. It is knit on size 11 needles, if you get gauge with that. And it's like a little bit cropped. It's pretty narrow, like it's not meant to be an oversized fit. So I knit through the body in this one sleeve super quickly. It's kind of funny because I'm not used to knitting on bigger needles. I typically knit things with smaller needles, and my wrists kind of hurt, like just like moving the yarn that much more to use the bigger needles. My wrists aren't used to it. Like I haven't built up the muscles in that kind of way that I have like the ongoing like strength that I do for like finer movements with smaller needles. But I will probably be able to finish this in the next couple of days because I only have the one sleeve to go. And once I do, I will post some pictures onto Instagram and you can see the actual finished object. So that is my kind of long-winded tale of two test knits. And I have a couple other works in progress that I have been working on that I also want to show you. So the first one is what I had brought with me on vacation to knit, and then basically had no time to do any knitting because we were very busy the whole time. But I am working on my second Cozy Classic Light by Jessie May. For this version, I am knitting the size extra small, which is not typically my size, but I knit the same pattern in the same yarn, but a different color previously. I will link to that here or wherever it may be, where you can see more about that. And the way that this yarn blocks, it's the Purl Soho Cattail Silk. This blue shade, I believe, is called Cerulean Blue? Cerulean Velvet, I think actually is the name. When swatched or when washed, my swatch went dramatically like out and narrower. So to kind of make up for that and get a more narrow fit, I had made, I think last time, a medium on the size, no, I think I knit a small last time. I knit a small and used the recommended needles, and I found it just a little bit looser than I was intending it to be because I wanted to get a fit that's either like a tiny bit of negative ease, zero ease, tiny bit of positive ease. So for this version, I am knitting an extra small, and I have also sized down the needles. So I'm hoping that with this, if it grows out a little bit, it's going to fit more narrowly. And by knitting a smaller size and still using just the one skein of cattail silk, that I'll be able to get a little bit more length. So the last time that I showed you this sweater, I think I had just finished the short rows and I have completely finished the yoke increases. I've split the sleeves and have just like barely started on the body. So this is now into pure stockinette land. It is just like a straight shot down. So I have a ton of yarn left in the skein. I think way more than I had the last time I knit this. So I think I can definitely make it longer, which is great. And I'm sure I will finish it fairly quickly because it's just gonna be like zooming by on stockinette. I have this on my, what are you called? Addies, maybe? I have these on my Addy, I think they're called lace needles. I'm not 100% sure. I will put the name, if I can find it, on the screen, but they're super, super, super smooth. And I think this is maybe a 12-inch set of fixed needles, and these are what I've knit hats on before. So I typically have used this for hats, but it is like the perfect size to knit the body of this sweater on because there's so much space for these stitches to scrunch up. I will say though, like these needles are super smooth. They're just, I think the needles themselves are probably smoother than my Chiagu needles, but the tips are much more rounded and I do prefer a pointier tip. Like I really like a sharp tip that I can like pick the needles much more quickly, or sorry, pick the stitches much more quickly. Where with this, I feel like I am having to pay attention a little bit more to not skip a stitch. Where usually with my Chiagus, I'm just like grabbing the stitches and going. Yeah, like you can even see I have to pay a little bit more attention with these needles because the more blunt tip is not picking the stitches as easily as I'm used to because I'm used to using much, much sharper needles. However, these are so smooth that it does, like the yarn really glides over the needles, which is nice. I got these needles specifically because I was knitting a bunch of Marlboro hats. I can never pronounce that correctly. I was knitting a bunch of hats for Christmas and I basically needed to be able to like fly on them. I didn't want to have to do magic loop. So I got these, which are like the perfect circumference for hat knitting, and it works out really, really well for this t-shirt as well. I feel like slightly silly knitting the same thing back to back. I mean, I have knit other things like since, but I cast off this sweater and cast it back on because I really like the finished object. But like, let me know, like, am I alone in doing that, of casting something off and casting it right back on? I think that this sweater in particular, actually, I really like top-down raglans. I find them very easy to knit and also to wear because you can try it on as you go and decide if you like how it's fitting. And also it's kind of mindless. So it's pretty easy to have like any of these going at one time. Plus knitting this as a short sleeve version, it only takes for me in my size one skein of yarn. So that's like quite an easy project to always have on the go for me. The last thing that I want to show you is my Big Love sweater. So I had put this down for literally months. I don't think that I've knit on this since March or something like that. And I picked it back up again. So I recently, like after getting back from our trip, I was starting to feel like slightly overwhelmed with the amount of projects that I had actively going on. Like it was just so many different knitting projects like all over the house. And so what I did was put together a little bit of like a priority list of what am I actively working on that needs to be done quickly, and then what products or projects do I want to work on next. Recently was kind of like going through my closet and was trying to figure out like what are pieces that I'm missing that I could make? Like what are some like knitted items that I really need more of, instead of just kind of choosing things, not willy-nilly, but like just choosing things that looked cool or looked interesting or had a technique I wanted to learn. I wanted to focus, at least for the next little bit, of knitting things that are going to be like lifelong sweaters or just things that I'm going to get a ton of use out of that are filling gaps in my wardrobe. And the number one thing that I noticed was cardigans. Like, I just don't really have any. I literally have one store-bought, my goodness. I have one store-bought cardigan that I really don't get that much wear out of because it's just a style I don't particularly like. It's something that I feel like is super 90s. I actually thrifted it. It could be from the 90s. So I feel like it's kind of coming back into style again, but there's just a couple of other like cozy wrap-up cardigans that I just like feel like I need in my life and I don't have. So I put together this like knitting priority list of things that I wanted to finish up and things that I want to cast on in the future and like actually do them, not necessarily in order, but at least things that I want to knit soon so that I have those items. So as I was making this list of like, what are things that I need and what are projects that I currently have on the needles and how does that work together, I kind of was just like, I need to finish my big love cardigan because it's going to check off two things. It's going to check off a work in progress from my list, and it's also going to check off a cardigan from my list. So the last time I showed this to you, I only had just barely split for the sleeves. I now have 3.5 or 4 inches of the body done. And this has just been this week. There's a little bit of like decreasing. You can't see that at all. There's some decreasing for this shawl collar that I'm doing that I'm almost done with. And then from there, it's just gonna be knitting the body and then knitting the sleeves. So I should be done with it, I hope, in the next month or so, like giving myself a month from now, because I'm trying to knit like an inch per day. And I think after I'm done with the decreases, I think I need to knit 10 more inches and then knit both sleeves. There's still a lot of knitting to do for this, but I've just like, I forgot how much I enjoyed knitting on this. So this is a very like trust the process knit. Like it's something where I can't take a look at the pattern and just kind of read through it once and then do it. I feel like some of the patterns that I have knit in the past, especially like something like this, I start it, I do the short rows, and then I kind of stop looking at the pattern. I look to see how many stitches I need on the sleeves before I split for the sleeves, and then I just use that information and go. Like I don't tend to reference the pattern a lot for something that's easy for me, like that I've done a lot of, like a top-down raglan. But this sweater is definitely checking every time that there's something different. Like anytime I need to make a change, I need to reference the pattern because it's very specific how it's done, and it's just not something that I'm as used to. I will try it on. So you can kind of see it's a little bit awkward because it'll be bigger, but my needles are in it right now and I don't want to take it off the needles to show you. But it has this shawl collar that was so interesting to knit. Like I said, it's very much trust the process. You like knit a weird strip with another strip coming out of it, and then somehow it all comes together and turns into like a very normal looking shawl collar. It will be drop shoulder, obviously, and then it should have kind of a boxy, oversized fit. I am knitting this with one strand of Istex Plutolopi, and I think the color is wine red. I can read you the numbers. So if you've ever ordered Plutolopi in the US, I have gotten mine through Webs, or I think it's just yarn.com. I'm 99% sure the name of this color is wine red, but they do it by numbers. So it's 2027 is the actual number. I've used one full plate, and then I have this much of my second plate to go. I have 2 more plates, and honestly, I think I probably only need 3. This pattern's actually meant to be knit, I think, with Letlopi, which is more or less double Plutolopi, or if you wanted to use Plutolopi held double. But I did want it to be a little bit thinner because, like I've said before, I run warm, and I wouldn't be mad about it being a little bit smaller as well. So even though I am knitting this with the same size needles, my gauge is slightly off on this pattern and it is slightly smaller than it ought to be, but that's fine. It obviously still fits. And I think it's going to be just like one of those sweaters. What's like the winter version of Coastal Grandmother? Like cozy mountain grandma? Cozy cabin grandmother. But it's like, instead of like romantically looking out to sea in your like white cardigan, it's like your big wool, cozy, chunky cardigan. That's the vibe with this sweater. Even though where I'm at right now, it is just completely knitting back and forth, and I'm not the biggest fan of knitting flat or knitting back and forth. The pattern and the texture that you are knitting into this really does keep like your mind activated. So it's a little bit more interesting than just knitting stockinette flat. I do not enjoy knitting stockinette flat. Honestly, I don't really enjoy knitting garter stitch flat either, but this has a really beautiful textured pattern. I'll try to zoom in on it so you can actually see it. That does keep you a little bit more engaged so that you're not just kind of knitting like a zombie. This has been super enjoyable to knit over the last few days. I really enjoy working with the Plutolopi. I know a lot of people have issues with knitting with unspun yarn, and I haven't. The only time that I have broken this, at least recently, is when I accidentally got the yarn stuck in the couch and I didn't realize it and I pulled on it and it broke. But besides that, it's like super easy to like roll the two pieces of yarn back together again and keep going. Because I'm having a lot of fun with this, I hope that I'm able to finish it fairly quickly, because I did buy some yarn to knit another cardigan, and I know I literally just did a whole long video of acquisitions, and I do want to start off with a caveat that most of that was fiber. I only got one sweater quantity, and I do have a sweater in mind for that, so I don't feel bad that I also bought another sweater quantity worth of yarn as a birthday treat to myself. So I'm done with birthday treats. I have treated myself plenty, but I did get some yarn to show you. So I mentioned I have this like priority list of like knitted items that I like need in my wardrobe and the works in progress that I want to finish as quickly as I can to get myself like in a groove of having just one or two projects on the go. That's my like preferred amount. My preferred amount actually is 2 projects, of having like something that's a little bit more of a mental exercise, something you have to pay a bit more attention to, and something that's super quick and easy and you can just mindlessly knit. That is my like ideal setup, and right now I have several different works in progress. So my goal is to finish my Silverstone sweater, which I should do pretty quickly, finish my Cozy Classic Light, and finish this Big Love cardigan, along with a couple of pairs of socks. I haven't even shown you those at all, but that can be another video. So those are the works in progress I want to finish before I get to cast on my Augustine's number 1, which I'm going to knit with the yarn I showed in my last video. And then I'm going to be knitting an Ozetta oversized seasons cardigan, which I'm so excited about, with Peace Fleece. So I literally just got this just today. It was kind of what encouraged me to finally sit down and film this video. I know it's going to be a long one, but I ordered this after ages of trying to figure out what yarn I was going to use, because I knew that I wanted to knit the oversized seasons cardigan because it looks a lot like the Tradlands Shelter cardigan, which is a cardigan to buy. Like it's not a knitting pattern, but it's super cute and a lot of people wear it and it looks really nice. And I was like, I could knit that. I could definitely knit that. So I was searching for a pattern that would look similar enough that I could actually accomplish. And I decided on the Ozetta oversized seasons cardigan. I was looking through people's examples on Ravelry, like what yarns have they used? And I saw a couple different versions using Peace Fleece. and it is a brand that I've known about for a while and have just kind of had like tucked in the back of my mind that I wanted to knit a sweater using their yarn someday. If you don't know about Peace Fleece, I do recommend reading through their website. It's super interesting, but it is not super local, but it's super US based yarn. It is using 75% Navajo Rambouillet and domestic fine wool and 25% mohair. And then I believe it's completely processed in the United States too. So unlike a lot of my other yarn that's kind of vaguely maybe from the Andes or wherever else it may be, this is super based in the United States, and they work with the Navajo Nation and I think they work with other Native American groups as well. I do recommend reading their website, but I did want to read exactly what they say about it. So they say, we work to support pastoral communities that have historically been within conflict in the United States. Currently, we're working with the Navajo to offer fair market prices for the Rambouillet sheep wool raised by families of the Navajo Nation. Our yarn is made of this wool blended with domestic fine wool and mohair for strength. We love what we do, and we hope you do too, which is nice. Obviously, I think it's really important to support small businesses and businesses that are actually trying to do good with their business. So it does feel good to finally have decided on like what project I wanted to use Peace Fleece for. This is just their plain white version. I don't think it's dyed at all, and it is super, super plump feeling. Like it is it's not like super like soft. It's not like that like mohair and silk blend that I had bought at Sweet Georgia, where that's like, it doesn't even feel like wool. Like that just is so soft to the touch, but this feels like woolly while still being soft. And I think that has to do with the mohair in it as well, which is really nice. But I think that this is going to be a beautiful oversized seasons cardigan. I can't wait to clear all of my needles so that I can cast it on. It is highly motivating for me. I forgot to bring them up with me, and I'll have to go downstairs and get them, and I'll insert a video of them. But I like got the pattern, I ordered the yarn, and then I ordered some buttons to use for it. And I ordered like cool vintage faux tortoiseshell buttons from eBay. And they are cool. They're also enormous. They're way bigger than I expected. I don't know if I just read the listing wrong or what. That's like a very classic me thing to do, is order something on eBay and not realize that it's completely different size than I had expected it. I do that fairly regularly, but I accidentally bid on another set of vintage buttons, and I will get those soon. So ideally I'll have some matching that set of buttons that I got that can replace the enormous like giant coat buttons that I actually got for my oversized seasons cardigan. If you've ever knit with Peace Fleece before, please let me know what it was like in the comments, because I've read that people machine wash it, and that feels very sketchy to me. I guess I could wash my swatch. Oh, words. I could wash my swatch to see how that turns out, but I don't know. Like, this is very woolly. It seems like a bad idea to put it into the wash, but like they even say on their website that they wash it in the washing machine. So let me know if you have used this yarn before and what the care for that sweater was like. I am eager to know, especially because I'm knitting this in white and tend to spill things and will likely need to be able to clean it. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. I have talked your ear off long enough today, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Bye.